Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about bad times at the Royale. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we like to do on this podcast?
You know, it has just occurred to me that we always call them the folks at home, but I never listen to podcasts at home. Anyway, for you folks, wherever you are, this podcast, we like to talk about games, but also movies and television sometimes.
Well, you know what, Buddy? I like to think that everywhere that we are is a home of some sort.
yeah, that's true. That's real. I'm down for that. So this week we're talking about bad times at the Royale. If you are a long-time listener, and by that I mean you listened to last week's show, you probably heard from Mango that he saw this movie, he liked it, he enjoyed it, and I decided to pick it up on an offhand 3:30 showing 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. And now it's time to talk about it. I'm curious. Okay, I'm curious. You know me, right?
Yeah.
What do you expect me to say about this movie? Like, do you think I liked it? You know, like, is this in my wheelhouse? Any of that kind of stuff.
Huh. That's a good question. I don't know how you're gonna parse this, because I know that you like some of kind of like the more artsy stuff. They did a little bit of this movie. I know that you like some of those aspects sometimes. I don't feel any of the big kind of bad things you like. I don't see a lot of bathos in this movie, which is your big sticking point. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it, right? Like the best parallel I can draw is that like it's Rashomon-esque, and I know you're a big Kurosawa fan, so that's probably my would be my best guess that you enjoyed it. Maybe not particularly so. What's
interesting?
What's your pre-spoiler impression? Because you already got mine.
I loved this movie. I think it's great.
Okay.
And not only that, this is a movie I am like predisposed to hate. Right? Like, I really don't like Drew Goddard. I don't think he's really good. I don't like Cloverfield. I didn't like Cabin in the Woods, which was full of bathos, and like not even in a funny way. Like a lot of Cabin in the Woods to me, it's just like very mean-spirited takedowns of like narrative devices that are necessary to make horror movies work.
Right.
I didn't like the first season of Daredevil, which he was the showrunner for. And so walking into this is by a creator that I'm already kind of like biased against. And then on top of that, without going to any kind of like spoilers, this movie really isn't about anything.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have, it's not like a theme movie in the way that I'm drawn to movies like Batman vs Superman, because it asks interesting questions, or, you know, something like Moonlight that has like really like deep and complex character studies and variations on these kinds of themes. Like, I think the movie is like deep and complex, but it is not deep and complex in that kind of like space. And so I am almost flabbergasted with myself that I came out of that movie being like, wow, that was awesome.
Yes, it's not even about what like the trailer pretends it's about. I feel like it's a very different kind of movie, so I totally get that. Did you want to say anything else before we got into spoiler territory?
I hardly recommend it.
All right.
I also think it's very worth it on the big screen. Not you know, like typically I recommend things for the big screen because of kind of you know, size and scale of like special effects and shit like that. But this is kind of the opposite of that. Like, this is a very art house movie with a lot of information and a lot of frames. One of the things that I liked about this movie is that it doesn't take you for granted, and it doesn't like cheat on your behalf. There's not a lot of exposition to explain things to you, and in a lot of places you just need to like read the film language as it is in order to kind of like follow along with like the plot and everything like that. And I feel like that must be a lot harder on a laptop screen, you know, where you might be checking your phone and tabbing out, than it would be on a big cinema screen. So I would definitely recommend people go see it in the theaters if they can. I obviously know that it's falling out of theaters as we speak.
Yeah, I cut it on the tail end of its theatrical run for my area, so it might be a little bit hard. But I don't think like that undivided attention thing. I think you can do other places. I would also recommend, if you can't get it in theaters, like actually sitting down and paying attention to this movie, and just kind of like absorbing it. Um, but with that out of the way, we're gonna get into spoilers territory. I feel like there's so much of this movie that is just kind of like woven into it that there's really not a lot else to say about it non-spoiler wise. So I think spoilers are kind of important for this movie. So if you want to see this movie, don't listen to this podcast. Go watch it and come back. Um, but yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Spoiler warning, spoilers. Come back at the end of the podcast if you want to hear how our weeks were, and that's it. But definitely go see this movie. But getting into spoilers then. I'm going to jump to the end because it was my favorite part. But like the Miles, I really, or what's his name? His name's Miles, right?
Yeah.
The
bellhop.
Yeah. The bellhop, right? Like this whole time, I think he's just like some fucked up kid, right? And it's like, and you know, he's been doing fucked up things for this hotel for a long time, and I you know, it totally caught me by surprise when this was the thing I was talking about last week, was the big twist for his character that kind of like refigured him. It's like, I can't kill again. How many people have you killed? 123, and it does flashbacks to Vietnam. I'm like, whoa, that caught me totally off guard, and it was great. It was like a great reframing of the character. It was awesome, and totally like redefined what this character was. Like, instead of just being like some loser, he's like he's a shell shock veteran of sorts. And so I thought that was absolutely my favorite part of the movie, and especially when it rolled into like him being an absolute badass for like 5 seconds and just taking out everybody. I figured that they would have to deal with the cult some way. I actually thought, my initial thought was that like the agent wasn't dead. Like that he was just gonna come crawling in with like a blood wound on his shirt.
Yeah, I also thought that might happen actually.
Because that's, I don't know. I guess we've watched enough movies that the tropes kind of raised their heads. But what did you think of that?
So I definitely liked that part, and I thought that was really interesting. What I liked about the bellhop in general was just that he wasn't taken, he wasn't taken for granted, sort of thing. Like a lot of people got, like this is one of those movies where basically everybody has an arc and everybody has like, interesting shit to do. And a lot of the times in a movie like this, where it's kind of structured like a mystery, you have a facilitator character that doesn't really get all that much interesting screen time or anything kind of along those lines, right? And I think that that's okay. But the interesting thing about Miles is that, like, yeah, he's the facilitator character, right? Like, he's kind of like the butler in Clue or kind of whatever else, right? But he is also he's also given his own arc and his own character, and he's moving through his own sort of journey in parallel with the 4 guests, right? And so I thought that was like really cool and really interesting.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Especially because like the whole thing about the hotel is, especially going into, I didn't expect it. Like the hotel is as much a character in the movie, maybe not as much, but like it's definitely a character in the movie in a way that sometimes kind of settings are just kind of like window dressing, if that makes sense. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
And he's kind of the conduit for that, right? Like we never see the management, but he's the conduit to like what this hotel is, why it's so weird and fucked up, and how it's the device by which all kind of like the storylines interweave with each other, which I thought was really, it reminded me a lot of like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. The whole movie is kind of like, it's a comedy of errors, right? Like everything just like, obviously it's a sort of plot contrivance, but it's one that you forgive for the sake of the movie. But it's funny, just like none of these storylines needed to interact with each other, just so happened to. I think that made it a lot of fun, if that makes sense.
What do you mean of like a plot contrivance?
Well, like it's a plot contrivance in that, these people all just happen to be here and all happen to have their storylines colliding at the exact same moment, right? Like it's not like a real, it's not like a plot hole, right? But it's like a thing that like, you know, it is like, but that's like how comedy of errors works, right? Like, these things all happen to line up in such a way that the worst possible outcome comes about. You follow me?
I guess I do. I don't know. I don't know if I would. In a certain sense, I guess I think plot contrivance is like a negative thing.
Sure, and that's yeah.
I wouldn't hold that against like like the I just wouldn't hold that against the movie. I guess.
Sure, no, absolutely. I
think this movie is a lot like a I liken these kinds of movies to like jigsaw puzzles. Like I actually don't think I'm ever gonna watch the Bad Times at the El Royale again. I don't really think I would get all that much out of a second viewing because I think the interesting part of this movie is you are in the theater and you don't know what's coming and you're trying to figure it out and like decrypt the movie as it's going. And like, are you clever enough and fast enough to see what's going to come next, right? Which I think is interesting and cool, and it pops up in other movies. Like this is a very like Tarantino thing. The Hateful Eight is kind of this, like built on this. In fact, this and the Hateful Eight are very similar movies, except for the Hateful Eight has like, it's like a deconstruction of like Western stuff, and so there's all of that like pieces, like there's all that kind of coming into it and stuff. But in general, yeah, that's the fun of this movie is trying to put that jigsaw puzzle together. And once you have the jigsaw puzzle, and once you see it fully, like I don't know that going back and rewatching it, like maybe you would go back and rewatch it to see like all of the clues that you missed and stuff like that. But like, I think this movie is fun to watch where the pieces fall and to see how everything like gets there, and if you can like keep track of it and like keep up with it in real time.
That is exactly right. That's why now that you've said that, it makes a lot of sense. It's why I think that spoilers for this movie are very important, and you shouldn't be listening to this now, listeners, if you haven't watched
sorry
it.
Listeners.
But yeah, I mean, I know I jumped to the end there, but did you have anything earlier in the movie that you wanted to talk about?
Boy, anything earlier in the movie that I wanted to talk about? I have a couple of things that I want to get in. Let me try and think of what's like first in line. I guess to a certain extent, I think I think that the initial setup with like Laramie Sullivan or whatever, like that was pretty great. And he's a vacuum salesman
and an obnoxious one.
Yeah, he's obnoxious, and they're chit chatting in like the lobby, and nobody's around, sort of thing. Like it's if you are like making a jigsaw puzzle out of this, like those scenes are finding the corner pieces. You know what I mean? Where it's like rooting the like this is kind of like setting the boundaries and like rooting the narrative. Like I thought it was great when Dakota Johnson walks in and she signs her name "Fuck you." That was that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, the piece of paper is kind of like not to obviously I like this movie very much, but the piece of paper is kind of like a motif I don't really felt worked for me. It just kind of like, oh, and yeah, there's that piece of paper again that they keep referencing, but it doesn't really resonate with me in any way. Then they burned it at the end. I feel like it was supposed to be more like that piece of paper is supposed to hold more meaning than it did for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know what was supposed to... Like this is kind of what I mean when I think it's a theme light movie. Like, yeah. I just don't really know how much the movie gave me any of that kind of shit.
Yeah.
I think there's something in here about like the 60s and the time period, because there's like a lot of touching on special aspects of the 1960s as a like...
Oh yeah,
it's like a cultural moment. Yeah. And so like maybe it has something to do with that, but I don't know. I just don't think that's what this movie like ultimately like wants to be. I think it just wants to be a really beautiful jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about some light theming later, because I do think there's a little bit that only shows up later when Thor shows up. to be the cult leader, which I thought was like obviously the fact that he was a cult leader was just really well telegraphed, right? Like that storyline was kind of obvious, but like they still did his kind of like flashback scene well enough that like I thought it was neat. um it probably had like really nice imagery, if that makes sense, right? It reminded me a lot of Far Cry 5. um even if he's just like kind of a stock cult leader. um I thought them cutting away from, at that point, the very kind of rainy and like dark hotel to do like this scene in like a field that's like bright, was really neat. And played well with it. And his character, um I forget the name of the character, was
Billy Lee.
Billy Lee, that's right. Yeah. I thought the character of Billy Lee like really added a lot to the really added a lot to the movie. Really, it's kind of like the nice kind of like final touch to kind of like be like a almost like a second arc in the movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, well, so I think he's the important shift into like kind of like Act 3.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
That takes place, and kind of like spirals sort of like everything out of like out of control.
Yeah.
But I definitely very much agree with you. I think Chris Hemsworth is the best thing in this movie. I think all of the actors and actresses did a very good job. Like I read an article about how everybody took a big pay cut just in order to get it made in the first place. And I can definitely see why, because if you're a Chris Hemsworth, or you're Dakota Johnson,
Or you're Jeff Bridges,
like this. Well, I mean, Jeff Bridges gets meaty roles, I guess, all the time. But I know how you can look at a script like this and go, wow, I have to be in this movie. There's a lot to sink your teeth into, just like from like an acting point of view. But I think Chris Hemsworth is the person who he ran the farthest and had the farthest to run, because he's such like a conventional movie star, with like Thor and stuff like that. Like, at the end of, like, Dakota Johnson still has Suspiria, right? Jeff Bridges has an Oscar, and he's in Coen Brothers movies and shit all the time. But like Chris Hemsworth, I feel like, is the person who is like, I want to do like an art movie that says, hey, just because I have to be a beefcake for these fucking $1 billion Marvel movies doesn't mean that I'm not an accomplished actor in my own right. Which was really interesting and compelling. It's funny because Chris Hemsworth kind of gets made fun of all the time in like the film press, because he's part of these projects that never end up going anywhere. Like he's in a bunch of Ron Howard movies. He's in Ron Howard's kind of Moby Dick movie, In the Heart of the Sea, which, by the way, is great, but it lost like $100 million. Nobody went to see it. He's in Ron Howard's movie about race car drivers called Rush. That was really good. And so people are always talking about Chris Hemsworth as like an actor apart from other of these actors, and this is the first time that I feel like I've seen what they have seen in him. Even as somebody who really likes, I think In the Heart of the Sea was a really good movie, and I'm really glad I saw it, and I wish more people had gone to see it. But yeah.
No, that's fair. Yeah. There was something else I wanted to. Oh, the theming around Billy Lee. So
okay, yeah.
This is something I wanted to bring up because I was looking for it, and I think I saw it, right. Like his whole spiel about, the answer is to not play the game, right? And like he keeps getting everybody to play everybody gives into him until at the end, where I don't know if this is really a theme, but like until at the end where Jeff Bridges just like while he's trying to play the game just stands up and like fucking headbutts him and like kicks off the end of the movie. I feel like that's like, that's the closest thing to a theme it has, right? Like don't play the games of petty tyrants, maybe, right? Like there's a little bit of that with like the Vietnam and the Nixon stuff. I don't know. It's very loose if it's anything, but
no, I mean, I definitely think it's in there, especially because in his scene with Rosie, he also says the same thing, where he's talking about rising above the game.
Yeah.
Because the people pit you, like, and then he gets Rosie to fight the other girl.
Yeah. That's the seed of it, and then he makes everybody play games in the parlor.
Yeah.
And then I think almost everybody has an aspect of that, right? Like the singer, right? Like has the experience with like the executive producer.
The producer, where she doesn't play the game, and so she ends up singing a lounge thing in Reno. I think Jeff Bridges' quote unquote game is prison, obviously.
Yeah. Although he's a little different. His brother's Nick Offerman, right? Like,
I'm so sure it has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, let me just look it up, because I remember looking at that and being like, no way.
Yeah, because it looks like, because he's the first character you see, right? But it's real drawn back.
Yeah.
It is him. I'm looking at the IMDb page right now. It's,
nice.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I was expecting that suitcase to be more of the MacGuffin. I was surprised it was only. I was surprised that it was only Jeff Bridges and the singer who were kind of like going after the
money. Yeah, that's
the
what
money.
I meant. Like that, it was kind of like, what is it? That it was like deceptive from its trailer, right? Because it definitely sets it up as kind of like the big deal, but like. Again, you're absolutely right. It's only one of like these kind of 6 interweaving threads. I think that's actually where a lot of like this jigsaw puzzleness is really pleasant, is that it's not actually around a central goal. It's just 6 interweaving stories that happen to kind of crash into each other and fuck each other up in various ways.
Yeah. I think if it had been like a little bit of a treasure hunt movie, that would have been okay. But I probably prefer a setup of the movie where everyone kind of has their own individual sorts of like goals or whatever, right? Dakota Johnson is trying to get out. Is trying to get her sister out of the cult, obviously, and Jeff Bridges is going after the money. I didn't quite figure out what Laramie, what John Hamm's character was trying to.
So he's a FBI agent who had set up a recording device at the hotel, but then he finds a bunch of other recording devices while he's taking his own out.
And you think that he's just his thing is just taking out the recording devices?
Well,
that's it?
so that's why he makes the phone call, right? He makes the phone call. It's like there's more recording devices there, and they want him to recover any remaining footage. But because in the process of exploring what the fuck is up at the hotel, he sees the kidnapping. And then he goes against his orders and goes and interferes with the kidnapping, and that's what sets everything off, right? The interfering with the kidnapping causes her to shoot through the window, which kind of like reveals the tunnel system behind it, where she also hits Miles in the face. I guess there's all I guess technically the step where the singer knocks out Jeff Bridges happens right before that, but like that theoretically, if John Hamm doesn't interfere, then the scene where the singer knocks out Jeff Bridges happens, and maybe and maybe that storyline resolves itself, but nothing else happens, right? Like that's the that's kind of like the thing that causes all the storylines to collide.
Yeah. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah. That the part with Darlene and Father Flynn in that bar, I thought was really interesting and compelling, because you knew at that point that. Like this is like the dramatic irony that I think makes the film so interesting, and it's so enthralling, right? Like I felt captivated by what was going on, and it was just because like a lot of really like precise movements in what you knew about these characters in their situation. Because like, yeah, if you're Darlene, you really don't have a lot of reason to suspect the father, right? But he is going to be doing something dangerous. And I could tell from a mile away. I think it was well telegraphed that like he was trying to drug her and stuff like that. And so their whole interaction and scene in the hotel lounge is probably the best one in the movie, I think. Especially her popping out of her shoes just so she doesn't make a sound running across the floor. I thought that was such a great detail.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Especially,
I also felt extremely cool. This is part of the what I was talking about when I said that that the puzzle box narrative, like it doesn't hold your hand and it needs you to like figure shit out for yourself, because it shows you her shoes in front of the jukebox when Father Flynn wakes up. Right?
Right.
Like the intro shot there is of the jukebox playing with her shoes there, and then Father Flynn wakes up. And I remember thinking, why were her shoes there? And then I was like, oh God, she did it so that she didn't make a sound when she was like gonna bash him in the face with the fucking champagne bottle. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's like the entirety of this movie is just like weird little moments like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
like Father Flynn never. First of all, we never actually figure out what his name is, right? Because Nick Offerman refers to him as Doc, and he refers to himself as as oh as Father Flynn. I assume Doc was a was a nickname, but according to IMDb, his name is actually Doc O'Kelly. Which actually makes it a lot sadder for me, because I just assumed that, like, that I thought it was a neat thing, like you never found out what his name was because he couldn't remember his name in that critical moment.
Yeah. I was actually really sad, to be honest, because what I was hoping is that Doc set up that he was a doctor and he was going to save Miles from the stab wound.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But then that didn't happen.
Yeah, but the thing that rolls with that is that he never actually says he isn't a priest, right? Like, before he can say it, the Billy Lee cuts him off. So, Miles, technically he's never said it, so Miles can believe he was a priest. I was also thinking that maybe the twist would be, like, there would be a twist there that, like, he actually was a priest before he got into the robbing business, and that's why he had the collar or whatever, but obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I thought that, like, I don't know. I think it was probably better that he wasn't, because I think that's another thing, like another, at least for Miles, right? Like, the fact that his redemption, like that he can go to rest, like I'm having trouble forming like a good thesis around it, but I like the fact that he is being redeemed by someone who's not a priest seems like it's supposed to be something, right? Like it's not actually important that he's forgiven in the eyes of God. He just needs to be able to live with himself, which is kind of like the entirety of his arc, right? And so he doesn't need anybody in the sky to tell him that he's going to be fine. He just needs to forgive himself for what he's done in the war. It comes in a little fast because the kind of Vietnam piece of that is obviously a very last minute thing, but
Yeah.
it obviously includes the stuff he's done at the hotel. Some funny moments in there too, right? Like, I laughed really hard when he was talking about the wolf, right? Like, he's like, it wasn't sexual, but it wasn't not sexual. That line killed me.
I mean, yeah, I guess at that point I was unsure. I don't know. I guess at that point I was kind of like unsure where things were going.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I felt for him in that line and a lot of the other kinds of lines surrounding all of that stuff.
Yeah. No, I obviously have gone on about this for a couple minutes, but the fact that he talks about all the horrible shit he's done, and in the course of explaining that, he never goes back to his time in Vietnam until he has to, until he breaks. And he never actually goes back to that. I think we the audience know it, right? But he never actually explains that to any of the to any of the characters. It's just a thing that we see, which I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Sometimes these things are, sometimes it is like a narrative shortcut.
Sure.
where you cut away right as someone where he says 123 people, then he cuts to Vietnam, and it cuts back, and I'm not quite sure if in between the seconds of that cut is supposed to mean I killed a bunch of people in Vietnam, but we're just going to like display that filmically for you, cinematically for you, sort of thing. But maybe, who knows, kind of thing. I was hoping that his drug addiction would play a part of it or something like that. I thought that was actually a really cool, neat thing when John Hamm is like investigating the hotel and sees him like passed out after doing a bunch of heroin. I don't know. Like, I thought that was the first moment that I was like, oh wow, this is like actually more of a character than I had initially expected to see.
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. What else can we talk about with this movie?
God, so the tape. Who do you think is on the tape? Do you have a theory? Do you have a fan theory?
It's somebody who was nice to Miles. I didn't have a good theory for that. I don't know enough about the '60s, I think, to have like a good theory for that. What about you? Do you have a theory?
So my theory is that it is JFK and Marilyn Monroe. I thought that was. I don't know that there is anything. I don't think that there is anything definitive. Right. Obviously, but it made sense to me, and I was just kind of I was trying to figure it out, and I thought that they might reveal it, but they never did. And I thought that made
that definitely makes sense. Just because we know he's dead. We know that like he was important enough, and that it would cause a big problem for him if it was released. So that would make sense. But I mean, I kind of feel like the cynical side of me wants to say that it was definitely designed to kind of like spark that kind of conversation, right? Like it's like it's like the light in the. It feels like he was trying to make the light in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, in kind of that same way, which is fine, I guess.
Yeah, it's not something that I would like definitively. I don't know. I wouldn't want to like definitively come down on it one side or another, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's my fan theory. I think is that it's like JFK and Marilyn Monroe.
It's a good...
Especially because it's like about the 60s. It's like so much of it is about like the 60s and stuff like that, and that was obviously like a fixture, I guess, of popular culture, and like the popular kind of consciousness was like this idea that the young president who got assassinated had an affair with a movie star.
What else? I thought that the use of the music by the singer was good. Like, I don't know. I'm a big fan of kind of like the music of that time period, so I recognize most of those songs. I thought they were just like really kind of well placed. I thought it was really clever the way they did like the hiding of the digging up the floorboards with the claps and whatever. I thought that was neat. I also thought it was really neat when she pulled the moment where she pulls off her hair, right? Because that's that's like a very visual kind of like a moment of character transformation. We see that she goes on stage without the wig at the very end. I thought that was really neat. I thought the stuff where Jeff Bridges can't remember anything is like a real problem that he actually had was kind of like a neat kind of like
subversion. Yeah, I agree with that, because like at first I thought he was faking it, but then I just like I don't know, I went back and forth on him faking it, because the first couple of times you see it would have made sense because he's already lying about who he is and stuff like that. to try and get like the money of the El Royale. But when it kind of like cropped up for real, and he asks Darlene when they're both like tied to the thing, like I thought that was like a really like humanizing, like a really humanizing moment for like him and them.
I actually think
in a lot of ways, I think some of the best tension was when you didn't quite know, and he gets in the car with Darlene,
right.
Because it's just like, boy, like, he just tried to drug her, right? And now she has a gun. She just witnessed some people being killed. Like, if she wanted to, she could have just shot him in the fucking face.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's actually one of the best parts of his character is kind of, like, unraveling what's true and what's not, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, a little bit less, obviously less dramatic, but, like, like, he really doesn't know anything about music because he's been in jail for, like, 20 years, but it's like, who's this? Deep Purple? It's not for me, right? Like, but that's also he could have been lying about him not knowing any music, right? It's like, oh, that's actually a true thing too. He's been stuck in jail and like losing his mind. So I don't know. I think that's kind of like. That's, like I said, that's the best part of his character is unraveling what's true or not. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's really unfortunately, because it was kind of obvious that he was never a priest, but, like, that gets spoiled by the trailer, that he's not the moment where he says, I'm not a priest is in the trailer.
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer, but I don't remember actually what's in it. It wasn't something where I was like constantly referencing back to the trailer for, which I think only helped me out. Like, I bet if I had watched the trailer right before going into the theater, I would have liked it less.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I don't know why it caught me so much, but like Jim O'Hare being in that last scene was like, that's like 2 Parks and Rec people randomly in this movie in very bit parts.
I have to say, even if I think that, even if I think that he did a good job or anything kind of like along those lines, it is so hard to see someone from a show like that and not be like, oh my God, it's whoever it is, right? Jerry, it's Dwight, it's any like big character from like a big big show that doesn't do a lot of other work. It always like sticks out like a sore thumb to me.
Yeah. Oh, I think I don't know. I think it helps that he's basically playing like, obviously he has like 3 lines, so it's not a huge deal. But he also
it's not something that you can really like get on his case for. Obviously, I mean the guy needs work and he deserves, like, he deserves a paycheck. And it's only a problem for like the bit parts like that. I don't get mad about Aziz Ansari being Aziz Ansari and Master of None. I don't get mad about obviously like Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not like I'm watching fucking Andy Dwyer, right?
Yeah.
But there's something about like Angela from The Office, who's like a like a bit part in that cast, or Jerry from Parks and Rec. That's just like, you're such a small piece of it, and you're not in anything else that you can't help but like draw my focus and attention.
Yeah, is it worse or better that he's basically playing Jerry in this 3 seconds that he's on screen?
I don't know. I do not know the answer to that question.
Because obviously he's supposed to be kind of like a derpy, because like it's supposed to be like Reno in that kind of like, it's okay, but it's Reno type way. What did you think of Rose's character, the younger girl?
I liked Rosie's character a lot. I think, in a way, I wanted to see more, but maybe that's not a good answer. I wanted to see more, I guess, especially of her relationship to Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to see like the two of them alone. Um,
I thought
yeah, I don't know.
I feel like I wanted to see just like a little bit of her relationship with her sister, like before the cult, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Although maybe that would have made it a little bit too tragic when, when Jeff Bridges shoots her, which is another move that I wasn't expecting. Right, like
yeah,
I totally expected her to like just like rage out and stab Miles. That made sense to me. But Jeff is like shooting her in the fucking face. Like it's you know it's obviously it's dark, but it's like I was like wow, didn't see that one coming. Uh, you know you generally don't shoot kids in these types of things.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the piece about her character that I wanted to get a little bit more of also was like the murders that she committed, because there's the talk about the two murders in Malibu, and then you cut to her, which I'm pretty sure is her having killed them, but I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if it was them or the dad.
No, it's supposed to be her. That's why Billy Lee makes the comment about like, did you tell them about what she did or whatever?
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. I wasn't like 100% positive, but I guess I do feel 100% positive now. And so I wanted a little bit more of that because I knew that was going to be a MacGuffin, even when it was first set up in the television thing. I was like, oh, this is obviously gonna come back, right? This is gonna come back around. One of these people, is involved with this or something like that. The funny part is that I saw, they actually hold on like Richard Nixon talking about the Vietnam War for like a minute and a half, and I didn't think anything of that, and I didn't think that would come back around, and then it obviously did with Miles.
Yeah, well, I that's actually I think a good piece of misdirection because this movie is so like, this is the '60s, right? Like you can't tell what's like plot relevant, what's just kind of like tone setting.
Yeah.
I thought was really clever. I also thought that was a neat like, I don't know. This guy seems to like do a lot of like, if I want to be like Red Letter Media about it, like, like, subverting expectations. Like that seemed to be his like Drew Goddard did that in that was like the whole point of Cabin in the Woods. And this movie has a fair number of them, but like I like they totally set up Rosie to get like a redemption arc, right? Like and then like pulled that out from under you, right? Like they show this the like her what was her sister Emily getting beaten, presumably, and like they show the flashback there. I guess you presume like my thought was like that was going to be like true like love for her sister wins out in the end, and then it doesn't. She like still badly in love with Billy Lee, and then stabs Miles for killing him, and then gets shot in the face, which is I don't know how much value I give that in terms of just like being a subversion of a trope in itself, but it was definitely neat if that makes sense.
Interesting. I guess I had less faith in Rosie's character than that. Like obviously she needed to be kidnapped out of the cult, and like restrained. And the first thing that she did when she was awake was call Billy Lee and give him her location and stuff like that. So I guess I expected Rosie to be, crazy and lovesick, and it was going to end up with like a lot of people dying.
Right. I get that, but like I don't know. I feel like the typical trope for that situation is like the brainwashed character, like snaps out of it when like the chips are down and like someone she cares about actually gets hurt. Right. Like I feel like that's the very typical trope. And obviously that's subverted here where she just like she's still like she doesn't care. But like
that would have also hypothetically been a good subversion too, because like the thing that Billy Lee is talking about being bad is like one person forcing two people to play a game.
Yeah.
And then he kind of like unironically engages in that behavior. So like hypothetically, maybe you could set that up as some kind of like a betrayal of his own sort of like false ethics.
But
that
like I think the thing that really telegraphed that setup for me and what turned into subversion is when Emily says she's not yours, right? Like, which is supposed to be this kind of, like, and of course she says I'm yours, right? But like that's supposed to be kind of like the, she has faith that Rosie will snap out of it, and she never does.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, which is really harsh commentary on kind of like, I think this movie, maybe if it does have a central theme, is a really harsh kind of like criticism of religion. Father Fred's fake, the cult leader's a piece of shit. Is there anything else in there? Miles wants to be forgiven and doesn't need to, like he needs to forgive himself. He doesn't need God to forgive him.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably something with like Darlene getting her start as a singer in choir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could. Yeah. Well, did
I have to say that I think I'm actually kind of sad that John Hamm's character died. Not just because I love John Hamm, but I think he would have been a useful piece of the puzzle. Like, hypothetically, let's just clone John Hamm's character, and let's say that there are two of him, but one of them dies and another one gets to kind of continue on influencing the narrative. I think that would have been helpful and instructive in a way. Like, I think that there's a little something to like, I guess part of it is that in the middle of the movie, right after John Hamm dies, I was still in it and I was still with it, but like I wasn't quite as with it as when I was following along with him, kind of along the narrative. Like the reveal that he was an FBI agent is really interesting and compelling, and like the stuff that he does to find out that there are secret rooms is like really cool, because it's just like blink and you'll miss it kind of shit, right? Like where he's going toe to toe, heel to toe to try and measure out the room to see if like there is a that there's a two-way mirror and stuff like that. I think all that stuff was like really cool and really kind of like complex, and in a certain sense, I almost kind of like wanted to see that character continue moving through, continue moving through the plot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's kind of maybe why I thought that he was going to come back, because like, I don't know, it feels like the FBI thread got dropped pretty hard. Right, like I thought that might have more to do with like the eventual consequences of the movie, right? Like you could have even still had that pick back up by like having the FBI show up at the end, like at the end of the bloodbath, right? Since they hadn't heard from him or whatever. Although he's the one that tears all of like the pieces out of the car, so that no one can escape. Yeah, it is kind of a shame that he's just there to kind of be like the inciting incident.
And it's a good like death, obviously. And I think that and I was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
Like if there's anything that is a testament to this movie, it was the moment where I wasn't sure if he was going to die or not. It made sense in retrospect that he was going to get killed, and that obviously he was going to get killed. And in a way, I sort of think of myself as being stupid for not going. He was 100% going to die there, buddy, right? Like, what else are you going to do with that narrative? How is he going to get out alive? And if he does get out alive, right, how are you going to continue to, like, ratchet the tension? Is this just going to become, like, a game of cat and mouse between, like, him and Dakota Johnson? That's not what this movie is clearly set up to be. But in the moment, I was really not sure. I was like really with the tension and with the drama of him and what he was doing. So yeah, that's probably like one of the best compliments I can give the movie.
You know what? That's another subversion there, right? Like, they very clearly highlight, don't, like he says, don't get involved, right? Like, don't interfere. And then he does it anyway because that's what Heroes does. And then he gets shot fucking dead. Like that's that. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I still really like the movie, obviously, but I'm just like seeing all these things that are like really intentional subversions while giving another thought. It's like, I guess it is a little bit heavy-handed. But it's
to a certain to a certain extent, I think that these subversions are necessary in order to create a film that is driven by its plot. Just because like plots are so predictable, right? like something I've talked about before is like how we are a media savvy culture, right? We watch a lot of stories. We understand on like a very basic guttural level what stories look like and how they unfold. And so if you're going to make a movie whose prime purpose, right, is to engage you not on a this is what like these are all of my metaphors, right? Or this is an interesting, and complex character that feels really real. Or, this is a bunch of the CGI blow-ups, right? If you are going to keep somebody enraptured with the minute to minute of, okay, what's going to happen next, you really need to engage in a lot of this kind of like subversion of expectation and stuff, I feel like, because otherwise people just figure your shit out. And I think that feeling that I just described is probably what you're going for, right? In the moment, you want people to go, I have no idea what's going to happen, what's coming next, right? But afterwards, you want them to go, you know what, that made the most sense, and I should have seen it coming. That's like the satisfying. That's like the definition of like a satisfying twist ending, right? When you look back over it and you say, I could have seen it coming. I saw the clues, but I missed them, right? And so like that's why it's satisfying kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little weird too because it's like you're misled by kind of like your garden path expectation that like the kind of expected unreality is going to pull through, if that makes sense, right? Like the like doing the quote unquote right thing is going to result in kind of the plot resolution, even though it's against all odds, right? Like the hero's triumph. It's like, well, what if you were in a place where like the odds, like being against all odds meant you actually lost most of the time, rather than a movie where like being against all odds, being against the odds might as well mean that you're guaranteed to succeed, kind of deal.
Yeah. Do you like Drew Goddard's other stuff? Like, did you like Cabin in the Woods?
I liked Cabin in the Woods.
Okay.
I was kind of like whatever on Daredevil season 1. I think I enjoyed it, but I thought Jessica Jones was too long. Daredevil might have been too long, too.
Yeah, I feel like that's all of these Marvel shows that are like 3 episodes too long.
What was the other one?
Cloverfield.
Oh, Cloverfield. Cloverfield I didn't like, but for physiological reasons it made me...
Oh, did you get sick?
Yeah.
That's also why I really didn't like Cloverfield. I literally got motion sick in the theater and I like wanted to barf.
Well, I sat through the whole thing, but I had to like keep looking down and looking up. Like it was kind of miserable.
I bet I want to see it again outside of the context of a movie theater to a certain extent to kind of like judge it. I also remember it feeling a little bit like rote and hacky.
Yeah.
Like I was excited by the prospect of of like this kind of disaster movie found footage thing, but I felt like they really didn't go an interesting direction with it. Because like they were following like, oh, fucking this kid is gonna go see his girlfriend or whatever, and like that just seems like very screenwriter 101 to me. I think the interesting thing would have been to kind of like break away from that kind of just conventional, I don't know, like it's such a conventional movie plot, and maybe it doesn't get made with like a more unconventional movie plot, but I remember being a little bit disappointed by that, where it's like, oh, we're gonna do like this hyper realistic, we're gonna pretend that it's found footage, and we're gonna give it a code name, Operation Cloverfield or whatever it's called, sort of thing. But yeah, I also thought that it was so stupid that the thing that you see. I remember being really mad about this at the time, that like the thing you see falling from the sky is not the alien, but it's a meteor that wakes up the alien, which is deep under the ocean and has been under the ocean, but not even the ocean. It's just the Hudson River. And I'm like, we know what the bottom of the Hudson River looks like.
Yeah.
I don't know, that made me so mad, like afterwards.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember too much about the movie. I just remember being sick, and I also remember the monster design leaking beforehand, and like that was supposed to be part of the mystique of it. You didn't really get a good look at the monster, and then like I saw a picture. It was like, oh, I remember seeing the picture of the monster, being like, that's a cool monster design, before even knowing what the movie existed. And then,
oh really?
Yeah. It showed up online. I think think this was like when we were in high school, right? So like, I think I saw it on like 4chan, um, back in the bad old days.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I also didn't like Cabin in the Woods, but that is for like the subversion thing. I think Cabin in the Woods is very mean to horror movies, and in a lot of ways is like, it's just like a very mean spirited movie because it's like making fun of, and like it feels like it's calling a lot of like horror movie sort of classic structural things bad and stupid, and it's like bullying them in a way. Like I really hate the moment where like the Chris Hemsworth character is like, okay, we need to stick together, and then the guys in the control center were like, oh man, like that doesn't make any sense. It's gonna be so hard to kill him if they stick together. So they like gas him, and he's like, wait, no, we need to split up. And like the whole point of that is to like show how stupid it is that in horror movies people split up, and it's just like, come the fuck on. Yeah, people split up when they want to like cover more ground. It makes sense just because, I don't know. It's like the same sort of like bad faith plot hole thing that we talked about a couple of casts ago to me, where like at some point these people don't know they're in a horror movie, right? So, like those kinds of criticisms always land very flat for me.
I don't know. I feel like that was kind of the point though, right? Like I really enjoyed the part where it was like a ritualization of like these horror stories is kind of like the American tradition, like, and they show the various other international versions.
Yeah, like the Japanese tradition and the Italian tradition or whatever. Yeah.
I thought that was neat, and like I don't know. I think that those criticisms are fair because, like, I think horror movies are schlocky, and that's kind of part of their appeal, right? Like, I don't know. I thought, what was it? Drag Me to Hell was the funniest movie I saw that summer. And for a long time, I didn't know if that was on purpose or not, right? Like that's a Sam Raimi film. And like it's ostensibly a horror film, but I think part of the enjoyment is that they are so schlocky. Even though like kind of like the text is that is that like this is supposed to be terrifying. Sometimes the subtext in those movies is that this is kind of silly, in a way. It's a lot of cheap, at least kind of like that era of horror, right? Like the best of the worst type movies type things. There are a couple of like good ones, but a lot of them are good on their ironic enjoyment value rather than on their like text, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never seen Drag Me to Hell, but I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and I can see why that. I guess that is a very like setup. And also, it's hard to tell with Sam Raimi just because of like the schlocky kind of like goodness of like Evil Dead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But to bring
I don't know. I'm also not much of like a horror film guy, and though I do have to say that I think the subversion. I think there is something very clever in Cabin in the Woods, which is the subversion of the like the virgin stoner thing.
Yeah.
There's a really good YouTube video essay about this by Movies with Mikey where he kind of explains that. And it's not something that I caught the first time. But, like, the core problem in Cabin in the Woods is that they fucked up who the virgin was and who, like, the whore character was. Because the guys in the booth were expecting people to play to the tropes that they looked like, but they didn't actually embody or whatever, and so that's the reason that they end up failing, because they they misdiagnose who is what in that kind of like 5-man band. So I think there's good stuff. It's very interesting, but boy, it really got on my nerves. Like kind of like.
I understand that,
mean-spirited takedown that I felt like it was to a certain extent, which is why it was so surprising when I came out of this movie and I was like, Jesus Christ!
Is this supposed to be so like a takedown of a particular style of movie that I'm just unfamiliar with?
See, I don't think it is. I think it is just it is So there are takedowns of this particular style of movie, and they are called all Quentin Tarantino movies,
Sure,
and they are
yeah,
all
yeah.
built exactly like this. And this is built like that, but it doesn't have any of the takedown aspects of it, right? In the sense that, like Inglourious Bastards is my favorite Tarantino movie, and it's a big takedown of these kind of like glory war movies. Like the whole setup for Inglourious Bastards is you are cheering the bastards as they are running around killing Nazis, and then the end of the film, Adolf Hitler is sitting in a movie theater watching a Nazi kill Americans, and it's that juxtaposition, right?
Yeah.
And the movie is going, you are just like Hitler, and you should feel bad about it, right? Which I think is really clever and like super interesting, right? And in the same way that like, so for instance, there's actually a really great piece on this by like now disgraced film critic Devin Faraci about how The Hateful Eight. Did you ever watch The Hateful Eight?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so in The Hateful Eight, this is kind of a spoiler. I'm sorry, it's 3 years old. In The Hateful Eight, Sam Jackson is carrying a letter from Abraham Lincoln because he was a freed slave who became like a cavalry commander or something like that in like the Union Army. And there is a white character who finds that so cool, and he wants to see the letter, and it's like legendary and stuff like that. And then you find out that the letter is fake, right? And that's like a deep criticism of the way, this is the kind of the deep criticism of the kind of like, liberal voter who voted for Obama as like a statement that racism is over, right? Where, you think that you are no longer subject to kind of like the forces of racism as soon as you make this kind of like grand gesture sort of thing. And like the falseness of that letter embodies that kind of like, that kind of idea. And that's just one aspect of that movie, right? Obviously it's a Western and has all these other Western kind of like tropes dealing with it. The person that Sam Jackson teams up with to beat the big bad in that movie is the Confederate officer that he has been feuding with this entire time, kind of thing. Anyway, the point is that I don't think that there is a lot of that stuff here in Bad Times at the El Royale. I think it is just played straight and played smart. And it doesn't need to rely on kind of like meta trickery, like postmodern trickery, in order to be good.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting too, because like, I don't know. I felt like I really like style, like very like kind of stylized movies, right? I like Tarantino, I like Wes Anderson, I like Coen Brothers, and I felt like this movie was like that, but it really wasn't. I was like, is it moderately stylized? I'm just like picking up on it wrong. I was like, it felt like it was trying to kind of like evoke that feeling without actually being stylized in that way, if that makes sense.
Huh. What do I think about that? I don't know. I think it is,
because like the El Royale itself, right? Like it's like, oh, this is like some like goofy fairy tale place built on the state line, but like it's kind of just like really just like a cheesy establishment that you might actually find in real life.
Yeah.
It's like a dumb gimmick like that.
I don't know. I think that there are definitely some pieces of it. Some of the way the shots are framed. There's a lot of frames that are split down the middle with the line between California and Nevada that I thought were, like kind of stylized. The movie was lensed by a guy named Seamus McGarvey, who is a well-known cinematographer. He's done a lot of big movies. He did The Avengers, is probably the biggest one, but he also did Godzilla, 50 Shades of Grey, right? And then like arty movies, something like Nocturnal Animals, right? Or like The Greatest Showman or whatever. So I feel like it definitely has that kind of look to it. It's not shot like a television show. It's shot like a movie, which is a good thing, I guess.
Yeah. You know,
I don't know. I definitely liked it a lot. I thought the neon light was good, even in the rain. Even though, probably the thing that was most unrealistic about this movie was that level of downpour rain happening in California.
yeah,
Like-
happening on the California Nevada border.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the El Royale is supposed to be by Lake Tahoe.
Oh,
Does,
yeah, so
Tahoe
that
get
might make more
rain or
sense.
something?
Yeah.
But I just assume that is very desert, right?
Yeah,
so, it's pretty funny. Yeah.
I've never been to Lake Tahoe. Have you?
I have not been to Lake Tahoe, no. But anyway, that is our spiel, I guess, about bedtimes at the El Royale.
Yeah. All right. So, how was your week?
My week was good. I'm trying to think of like the stuff that I have been doing. I've been playing a lot of WoW, obviously. I'm still deep in that Battle for Azeroth train. I'm very hyped for BlizzCon, which is coming out next week.
Well, it's happening now, right?
Oh wait, it's happening now. Oh wait, is it this weekend or next weekend?
Well, it started last weekend, but it was all like tournaments and stuff. I don't know.
Oh my god, yeah, you're right. Yeah, wow, it's this weekend. For some reason, I thought it was next week. Holy shit! BlizzCon is this week. I'm so excited. I did not buy the like the BlizzCon pass or whatever.
Yeah.
But the pass this year came with a demo for classic WoW. And I really did I really debated. The pass was super expensive. It was like $50 to play the WoW classic demo. But I really do want to go back and play classic WoW just because we've talked about it a whole bunch on the cast, and I'm really excited just to see if like we're
wrong.
Yep, that's it. We were wrong about it, basically.
I guess we'll see. I can't imagine, like, I don't know. I feel like if I'm gonna be more cynical about it now, just because like I've been following some of this stuff, I feel like, what is it that like? There's a couple of like these Kickstarter MMOs that are that are like kind of rolling through, right? Like, Dark Age. There's like a Dark Age of Camelot spinoff. There's Ashes of Creation. There's Crowfall. There's probably a couple more. There's like Chains of Illyria, I want to say. There's like a bunch of these games that are kind of like, you know, saving the MMO genre from itself type garbage. That I think, like, if the cynic in me wants to say that beyond the technology stuff that happens, like Blizzard's like, well, we better grab our own piece of this pie before we steal it from ourselves type of stuff, right? Like, of this, people who want to play like the old style MMOs. But I don't know. I'm interested to see too. Let me know if that happens. What has anything great been happening in WoW since that's all you've been doing for a while? And
I guess the greatest thing that's been happening in like the weird, like we're learning a lot more about classic WoW. One of the big things about classic WoW is that they are doing upgraded like graphics and features. So like stuff like view distance and ground clutter, you're getting much more of it, and I think that stuff makes like a real difference. But you're not getting the new character models, which might actually be a break moment for me. I was really hoping that they would have at least like a setting that you can toggle,
right,
where you can like choose between the old shitty models and the new good models. But yeah.
Yeah. Huh. I mean, like in regular WoW, is there anything new and exciting?
Have we talked about the new raid?
No,
that's
not
coming
really.
out? Okay, so this is actually kind of the coolest thing about like the next patch that's coming out is the new raid is like called the Battle for Dazara Lore, and it is the Alliance show up to the Zuldazar, and they ascend the pyramid to go like cut off, like the Zandalari fleet and all this other kind of stuff. And so it's a 9-boss raid that gets told in like three boss chunks. There are 3 bosses that both sides share, right?
that are mechanically identical, even if like the models and stuff change. So like you might be fighting. I think there's one group called like the Lightbringers, which is a pair of paladins. For Horde side, the Paladin's like a dwarf and a human. For Alliance side, it's a Blood Elf and a Tauren or something like that. There's a jungle ape. There's like a big giant ape that you have to fight. For the Horde, you fight the ape and then it dies. And then for the Alliance, Bwonsamdi brings the ape back to life as a zombie. And he fights back or kind of like or whatever. And this is sort of like 8.1 spoiler territory. If any of you are WoW people and you're listening and you've been able to keep yourself unspoiled, just mute the podcast for the next 2 minutes. And it ends with King Rastakhan for the Alliance. You go, you fight King Rastakhan, and then you kill him. So he dies in the Battle for Dazara lore. And then the next 3 bosses are the Horde chasing the Alliance out of the city. And so you fight Gelbin Mekatork and somebody else, and then you fight Jaina, who is the final boss of the who's like the final boss of the raid. But the cool thing is that so if you're Horde, right, you start and you fight your first 3 bosses, and then you talk to like a Horde scout that saw, quote unquote, saw the Alliance fight their bosses, and then you fight as the Alliance.
Okay.
Like you'd like race change and like you fight as part of the flashback. So you as a Horde player will you know kind of like take on, you know, I like as a Tauren warrior, I become a Draenei warrior when I'm fighting Rastakhan or whatever. And then if you're Alliance, you will talk to an Alliance scout who details what the Horde did fighting back. But yeah, so the thing that I find very cool about this is that these aren't just like made up bosses out of nowhere where it's like, oh, here's the Titan raid and we're going to have to put in a bunch of shit in here to make things like interesting for you, right? These are like named characters, right? You are fighting Gelbin Mekatork, the gnome racial leader since the very beginning of WoW. You're fighting Jaina. You're fighting Rastakhan.
You kill Gelbin and Jaina?
You do not kill Jaina. I think it is unclear what you do with Gelbin. At first, it looked like you didn't kill Gelbin because there was a bunch of data mine text about how he had like pilot learning operational Titan armor, which is plot armor.
Right.
But then it turns out that the plot armor is actually from a completely unrelated thing. It's from like questing in the war campaign. So yeah, maybe we kill Gelbin Mekatork here. It is currently unclear.
I just think that's really funny because Gelbin's like the least important Alliance leader.
No, I mean, yeah, he definitely is and everything.
He
like
finally
that.
got he finally got into a cutscene in Legion just to be killed in the next expansion.
Yeah. I really, to be honest with you, I really hope that we kill him, just because I will feel really gypped if both like Alliance like leaders that we end up fighting as part of this raid like escape by the skin of their teeth kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, right, like I think that is just the coolest thing because like it ties in so explicitly with the goings on of the world. You know, like these are not small characters that are set up only inside of the expansion or whatever. These are like real named characters with like a long history in WoW that you're fighting.
I mean, Rastakhan kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, that is fair. I mean, we like Rastakhan is a little bit like Xavius or something, like Deathwing, right? Where, you know, there is evidence of him, but it's very like small evidence, piecemeal evidence, kind of, you know, sprinkled sort of throughout. But yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. That's interesting. Well, I guess like I was wondering when like kind of like the Rastakhan pledges himself to Baron Samedi kind of plot line would pay off. I guess it's like very soon.
Yeah, exactly. Especially because Talanji is like such a major character and is like clearly so good, I guess, is clearly so good at like running the kingdom or whatever. Like basically like one of the themes of the different quest lines that all happen for the Horde side is kind of how Rastakhan hasn't been a very good king because he's sort of just been like blinded to it, and those things like came home to roost in Zandalar Forever.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah.
Yeah, neat. Anything else?
No, I guess that's it. I mean, they keep like rebalancing stuff like that, but we talked about a whole bunch of that stuff last week, so I'm not going to belabor that point here. So yeah.
Yeah. I've got some stuff to talk about. It's a little bit less since it's been shorter than our normal time between episodes. I did go and see another movie. I saw mid-90s, Jonah Hill's, I believe it's his directorial debut. It's 24 Pictures. It's a weird movie. I don't want to say it was good. I don't want to say it was bad either. I was discussing with I went and saw this with my brother. I was discussing with him. It's a skater movie. My brother was very much into that culture, and I wasn't. So he definitely appreciated the parts of that resonated with him. And there's some kind of like coming of age stuff in there that I think is generally applicable. But we both kind of agreed that like they didn't like it was kind of like weird and artsy, but like not weird and artsy enough that they abandoned all plot structure. So like, you know, and like it was like kind of veering towards like Call Me by Your Name territory for me, and that like it was just kind of like, you know, what is this, like what is actually happening here and why do I care? But then they had some aspects of that, but like so little of it that like it also was unsatisfying for that angle. So the way I put it is I think they had the exact wrong mix of that kind of stuff, right? Like too little plot structure to be to kind of like be really satisfying from a traditional narrative point of view, and too much to like really capture that art house vibe in a satisfying way. It's definitely different. It's definitely a 90s nostalgia trip in a lot of ways, right? Like even like I said, even though I wasn't a skater person, like I caught a lot of that. A lot of stuff that like I don't know caught me in like a weird way, just because like, you know, there's a lot of how do I put this, language from the 90s that they use vociferously that you know I hadn't heard in a long time, but definitely was relevant. You know, various slurs for gay people and for less mentally able people that got thrown around a lot in that time period and in the movie. So it really felt authentic from that kind of perspective.
That's very cool. I feel like we're getting a lot of these movies because there's also Bo Burnham's 8th Grade that just came out. That's kind of in that like similar vein.
Yeah, but that's more modern, right? Like that's like a social media.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. I just mean in the sense of kind of like he's like slice of life.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's like Lady Bird from last year.
I feel like you wouldn't like it because it also kind of reminded me of kind of like the mumblecore type stuff. It's a very
man. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's a weird movie. There are some good moments, and you know, it's got some other weirdness to it too. Like spoilers for mid-90s, but there's a scene in the middle where like the main character, who's like looks like he's like 10 or 11, like has, it's not like a sex scene, but he has like, you know, implied sexual intercourse with like a 15-year-old. It's just really weird. And like I just kind of like recoiled at it kind of reflexively, and I don't know what the point of it was supposed to, like it didn't feel like meaningful or anything.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. It was different. But you know, I can't say I recommend it. If you're a skater person, maybe go see it because you'll get a lot of the nostalgia hits there. But otherwise, I could give it a pass. What else did you?
Yeah, that's rough. Man, I also have been watching movies, but I'm trying to remember what movies I watched this week. So one movie I saw this week that's recent is Sorry to Bother You. Have you heard about this movie?
No, I haven't, I don't think.
So Sorry to Bother You is the directorial debut of a guy named Boots Riley, who's a rapper. from Oakland.
Is this the movie where like it's the call center and the guy puts on the white voice that's like a different
Yeah,
actor?
it's the call center and the guy puts on the white voice and it's David Cross.
Yeah. I haven't seen it, but I saw the previews.
I'm not going to spoil it here. I think this movie is good. I like this movie. I think this movie is good. It is very weird, and it definitely has like weird problems associated with it. But it's like, it's one of those movies that's like rated on a scale of 1 to 5, and I'm like, Apple. Like, it just because it's so off the wall. You might not like this movie because it's pretty explicitly socialist. Like, part of it is like the fight for the telemarketers to create like a union for themselves against like these. It's a whole thing. But Boots Riley has made no aspersions otherwise. He's been going on places and talking about like how capitalism needs to end or whatever. And from like an allegorical place, I guess I sort of get it. Though I don't really know how well or how poorly the movie sort of makes its point, just because it's so fucking out there. It's so crazy. It's a movie that starts in a very like weirdly normal and down to earth place, and there are a couple of like small things that seem a little bit off and seem a little bit dystopian, and then those things pay off later in the movie, and you just like end up in this situation where you're like, how the fuck did we get here? How are we talking about whatever we're talking about, sort of thing. So you saw Sorry to Bother You. I also continued watching these like legal dramas. I don't know why I ended up doing this. And I saw The Rainmaker. Have you ever heard of this movie?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so The Rainmaker is interesting because it is actually apparently the least famous of these, this. So John Grisham is like a paperback writer who makes movies that are a lot like this, that like legal dramas, and he's famous for a movie called The Pelican Brief and The Firm. The Pelican Brief being a Denzel Washington movie, and The Firm being a, I think, Tom Cruise movie. And I know of both of these movies, but I haven't watched them either. The Rainmaker is Danny DeVito and Matt Damon in like 1997, but it's directed by Francis Ford Coppola, of all people. And it's very well directed too. I was really surprised because like, you know, everybody talks about how Francis Ford Coppola kind of like fell off after like Godfather 3 and stuff like that, but like no, like this is like really well done. And it tells the story of a kind of like small town like in Memphis, Tennessee, like a guy a lawyer who's fresh out of law school, barely passes the bar. And he kind of ends up in this giant case against an insurance company that essentially refused to honor its the claims of one of its clients, like one of its customers, right? And like a kid dies because of it. And so like it's a small town kind of like underhanded lawyer going up against like a big sleek law firm, which is kind of like, you know, the DNA of like Better Call Saul, which I have said elsewhere on the cast that that Better Call Saul is the best television show that is currently on television. And it's him and then his paralegal, who's Danny DeVito, who are kind of, and so it's like a David and Goliath story, but it is also very wonky, which is why I actually recommend that you should watch it. And I think it's free on both, I think it's on Amazon Prime and Hulu right now. Because like they are exploiting like the side of the law that like the big guys never think of or never have to deal with. So like there's this whole bit about like evidence that's been stolen and like can you use stolen evidence or whatever.
Poison tree, yeah.
Yeah, and so they know because they, you know, like they come from this law firm that's like that's like defending, you know, strip club owners or whatever, that you can, and then they use that, and then John Voight, who plays like the other attorney, like the big sleek attorney, is like totally caught off guard. But it's a lot more wonky than some of the other sort of like legal dramas are. You know, like A Few Good Men is at the end of the day not a very legal movie. It doesn't really like stand up to like legal scrutiny, and it's kind of more like sort of like moralizing in a way.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like, well, let's play through the loopholes to see what we can see, kind of thing.
So I have a question for you because we've been talking about these legal movies for a couple of weeks now, but I haven't heard you mention the best legal movie of all time. But I have on good authority is actually fairly accurate to the legal system. Have you watched the seminal legal picture, My Cousin Vinny?
No, I haven't. I thought you were gonna say Legally Blonde for some reason. I don't know why. That's just. I was like, what is like a good, like, what is like a trashy legal movie that I can think of? And Legally Blonde is the only one that occurs to me, which I think is that case is one because she can like prove that somebody didn't take a shower because they had a perm,
Something like that. Like, yeah.
What? No, I have not watched My Cousin Vinny, though I now want to. I've been watching things that are like free on like Hulu and like Netflix and stuff like that. Yeah, so My Cousin Vinny is not free, unfortunately. Yeah, but I might rent it because
you should see it at some point.
Know.
I don't know. This is My Cousin Vinny.
I saw My Cousin Vinny when I was like a kid, when I was like 10
on television in parts.
Yeah, 100%. So this is actually okay. So this is actually part of what I find so interesting about Teen Titans Go, because have I ever told you this? There is an episode that is entirely built around a My Cousin Vinny reference.
Really?
Because Brother Blood, so this is what happens. The Teen Titans Go are fighting Brother Blood, and they cause all of this like ridiculous cartoonish property damage, right? And Brother Blood takes them to court, and it's like, you guys caused all of this property damage. And they obviously did, but they're like trying to figure out how to get out of it. And Raven gets on the stand and does a Marissa Tomei impression from My Cousin Vinny. And it's like a 3-minute extended reference. And I'm sitting there watching and laughing my ass off. And I'm like, what child gets this? What 5-year-old kid in 2018 is watching Teen Titans Go and laughing as Raven is talking about tire tracks in a New York accent? And I was just like freaking out because it doesn't make any sense. Does it not make any sense, Mango? Though the best part about that is that after Raven finishes her thing, everybody looks at the judge and he just slams the gavel and goes, guilty, and then it cuts to black. But yeah, My Cousin Vinny, what the fuck? Yeah, that is a very TV movie. It's
I don't know why.
A TV movie that is.
It does fall into the tip. There's the formula for this, which is that or like where the end stage is they win the case because of specialized knowledge on the part of like, you know, the person you expected to fail miserably because there's like some punk, right? And they just happen, you know.
Yeah.
Like that's usually the vector, and this definitely has that. This might actually be like the trope. No, it's definitely not the trope created for, because I do remember there's like a Happy Days episode where that's also the case, where like the Fonz is on a jury. I think it's supposed to be a 12 Angry Men reference or something, but the Fonz is on a jury, and like there's,
oh my god, what a Happy Days pitch. All right, so it's Fonzie, but he's on the jury.
and he figures out the guy's innocent because he knows that the claim is that the person like rode away holding like the person's handbag in the air with like their left hand. And he's like, hey, he was riding like Harley 257, and the accelerator's on the hand that he said that he was holding it with. So it was impossible. We have to acquit. And for good measure, the guy that's being accused is black, so it's like Fonzie shaking hands with like a black dude in like a scene of racial unity.
Racism is solved, everybody.
Racism. And that's why Ron Howard
12 Angry Men? I know I
Wars.
talked about 12 Angry Men a couple of weeks ago. Because that's kind of, I mean, really what started is Better Call Saul. Like, at first I saw Better Call Saul and I was like, all right, I should watch some of these, like, lawyer movies in a way, because I feel like that's something I'm not super up on. So I watched 12 Angry Men. And in 12 Angry Men, they don't follow the law pretty well either, because there are a couple of plot points where, like, they keep saying beyond a reasonable doubt, right? To excuse, like, this kid or whatever of like the murder of of like the murder of his dad or something like that. But like beyond a reasonable doubt isn't what it says it is. Like a reasonable doubt is like 5%. If you are 95% sure that something took place, then that's beyond a reasonable doubt, or whatever. Like from like a legal standard, right?
Yeah.
That's about how much it goes.
But
like in 12 Angry Men, they're like, oh well, it could have been anybody, and like they call that reasonable doubt.
My law professor, how did my law professor in college said that like beyond a reasonable doubt is like what it's like 1% if you're the it's like 1% if you're the prosecution, like 5% if you're the defense, right? Like, but with the point being that like, you're like that's the way it's like the like you will claim one way, but it will actually practically be the other way. But that's it is not a hard legal I don't think it's actually a numerical legal concept. I could be wrong about that. I obviously
yeah. It is definitely like that sort of like 1 to 5% sort of thing. But like the way 12 Angry Men plays it is it's like as long as you can make up some kind of like fantastical reason why this person fell on his own knife, like whatever. The other thing is that new evidence gets introduced in the jury room.
Yeah. That's
because it's like the famous one, right? The guy pulls out the same knife and puts it down, and he's like, "I bought that for $6 around the corner or whatever," which you're not allowed to do, obviously, as jury. Though there is some stuff in there that I thought was like kind of interesting, where they like kind of think through. They do that thing where they like think through the testimony that they got, and they kind of line up and sort of prove that the people who are eyewitnesses in this case really could not have been as sure as they presented themselves to be. And so it's a classic or whatever.
Yeah.
But
if you guys at home are actually interested in the workings of like the real legal system, I personally am a big fan of the Supreme Court stuff, and I have a lot of faith in the SCOTUS, but it doesn't always translate down into everyday courtrooms. And if you want to hear a bunch of stuff about that, the latest season of Serial isn't like a single case like they did for their first 2 seasons. It's a series of encounters in I think it's like a Cincinnati courtroom, or not courtroom, but like the Cincinnati legal system, and a bunch of different kind of things where like justice is kind of like not as blind as we'd want it to be. It's very interesting. It's very good. So I'd highly recommend that.
What do you mean by justice is not as blind as it's meant to be? Just
it's not out and out corruption, right? It's not like, I mean, there's a couple of examples of that, but it's not like, it's usually not like, somebody like lying about something. It's like judges using their discretion in a way that like you probably wouldn't approve of, right? But they have all the power, so you can't do anything to stop it.
Right.
Or just kind of like the practicalities of the system, right? Like the common version of this that's like not unique to the podcast is that like vast majority of cases plead out because it's faster and it's more guaranteed, and that's like a mess, right? Like there are problems with the legal system as it stands, and that's good for kind of like exploring that.
I know. I don't know a lot about that, but I do know about that because in college, boy, do I want to talk about this? So in college, there is a sex offender rehab clinic in Baltimore. And in college, I chaperoned a trip for a class of like high school students. They were in like pre-college. They were like taking Hopkins courses over the summer. I chaperoned a thing of them going to that rehab clinic, and it's like one of the most like foundational, like eye-opening experiences of my life, to be honest with you. And part of what they were talking about is that very phenomenon, right, where people were pleading out to things that they thought were very small and minor, and it ended up putting them on the sex offender registry, and it basically like destroyed their whole lives. So like one guy was talking about public urination that got charged as indecent exposure, and he had a public defender and he didn't know what he was doing, and nobody cared about him essentially. And when he pled out on indecent exposure, and he could have probably dropped it down to public urination and been fine. But when he pled out to indecent exposure, it put him on the sex offender registry. And he basically like lost everything and has been like bouncing around these halfway houses and shit like that.
And so, yeah, that is like a real, that's like a real thing. That's like a real problem. Because in a lot of ways, like the legal system is kind of built on the efficiency of those cases being able to move insanely quickly through courts. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. We are not a social issues podcast typically, but
yeah, what the fuck? I'm sorry. I also agree with you. I find this stuff very interesting.
Yeah,
I've actually never gotten into serial
there's
of all things.
There's a big rabbit hole to go down there. Something that I wanted to we're late. I'm gonna bring it up anyway because why the hell not? This should be relatively quick.
Yeah, we also had a little technical difficulties in the middle.
Oh, that's right.
I guess we have a little bit of time.
We got a couple more minutes, but so recently Gimlet's podcast Reply All had an episode called Autumn, which I thought was really good, in terms of game stuff, because it's a story about how this woman lost her grandmother, who was like her mother wasn't abusive, but wasn't very close with her. It was kind of like distant, and her grandmother was very important to her, and when she died, she couldn't deal with it, so she recreated her in The Sims and dealt with her grief through The Sims. It's a very interesting episode, and I definitely think I'll link in the description. I think you should all go listen to it. But the part of it that I want to talk about, which is totally unrelated to the subject of the episode, but the woman is black, and she mentioned that in the base Sims, there's not a lot of good options for black characters, and that there was a big modding community around it, that she could go pick up all of those items through mods to kind of like build her grandmother in the way that she wanted to. I was thinking a little bit about how, like, that's a typical thing, right? Like the character creators for black people tend to be like one of like they're very rudimentary options typically, except in in like sports games. But this popped into my head because Japanese games always have really shitty beard options, which is kind of like
oh my god,
it's like a parallel in a way, right? Like because it's made for a Japanese audience, which doesn't have as much kind of like, I guess, importance on facial hair options. I think there's a technical reason for it. I think it's because if you make like substantial facial hair, you actually have to give it polygons, and almost all beards in Japanese games are like just like textures painted on, so they're like really like shitty beards and whatnot. I don't know. I just thought that it was it's kind of like interesting kind of little cultural tidbits, right? That like pieces of things that get ignored.
That's actually something that I learned about in college. It has a name, like it has like an academic name.
Oh, does it?
But it's essentially the phenomenon of like racist lighting, which is that we light movies for white people, right? For white skin, not for black skin. And which, makes sense. Obviously, black people were super oppressed when filmmaking was like coming around, and so a lot of the filmmaking roots that we have from the 20s, 30s, and 40s are when segregation was still a thing and like hardcore racism was still up and running, kind of thing. And only now are we sort of like decrypting and relearning some of the basic principles of cinematography and of lighting in order to help make lighting black people better and not awful. There's a really good YouTube video about this that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but it essentially talks about how the black cinematographer of the movie some movie knew, like he understood this problem, and he was able to like make the movie like really good and pop off the screen because he was using a lot of light blue fill lights, which are just better apparently for this, but nobody thinks about this because everybody thinks about, oh, you know what, I think it might be a Vox YouTube video on this. But yeah, like that kind of thing is actually more common than I think we would think, and nobody thinks about it or talks about it, right?
Yeah.
Because like even when I was in film school and we were learning about lighting and we were learning about cinematography, right? You are taught that it's a one size fits all sort of thing, right? And that the way that you light certain people is always going to be fine, and you're not going to have to worry about it, sort of thing. But it was only after I got out of college that I ended up learning about like this topic and this kind of idea, and I thought that that's really interesting, especially because like the especially because in games, I do feel that about like character creators. I think that they're kind of sort of like biased, sort of like one way or another when it comes to, like, for instance, in the World of Warcraft character creator. You can give somebody like black skin, but I don't really think that you can give somebody like, you can't give somebody black facial hair,
Yeah.
right? Or like you can't give them an afro, right? Or something kind of along those lines. And I think that that is like a certain weakness to the. I think that's like a certain weakness to like the way that we build our games.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, it's also just kind of like a matter of cost, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's as bad as it is, right? Like, you know, if you know, you having to cut feature, or you know, how much you can put into those features is often like a dollars and cents decision rather than kind of like a moral one, which
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I have my own personal hill to die on with this one, because I am left-handed, and the only games that let you play left-handed characters are like tennis games.
That's funny.
Yeah, no.
Tennis games, yeah.
And like,
Man, yeah, wow, that would feel really weird, I think, if I had played a left-handed character. Like, if I played in Red Dead Redemption, and he was pulling out his gun with his left hand, I feel like that would feel very weird for me.
yeah. The Link is canonically left-handed, or is always, he's left-handed in every game except for like, what was the Wii U
Breath
one?
of the Wild?
Not Twilight Princess.
Twilight Princess,
because you played it, not the Wii U, the Wii one, because you played it with the with the remotes in your hand, and you were supposed to swing 1-to-1. So that's actually, he's left-handed in the GameCube version, and in the he's right-handed in the Wii version. And the way they did that is they literally, the whole game is mirrored, like 100.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Which is crazy, but you know, that's yeah, that's my own hill to die on. Not that like it's that important, but it's always a thing that I wish was there, because it's like, seems like it'd be like such like a little thing. Obviously, there's like technical requirements to everything, but like, you know, some games you can kind of like half get it in. Like, I think you can kind of get it to work in Skyrim because it doesn't care so much about your handedness, or maybe it does. I don't remember. Like, there are ways.
Well, Skyrim you can change, right?
Right.
You can make your left hand dominant if you want.
I don't. It's not, that's not a core option.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you could assign anything to the
You
left
can assign
or
anything
right
to
hand.
either hand, I think. Which kind of like,
Oh, but like maybe if you like pick something up off the ground.
yeah, like
It'll use
it's
like a
still-
right-handed animation.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can actually hold a shield in your right hand, but if you're using one-handed things, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you know, that's just, you know, it's a little thing. But anyway,
That is very interesting.
yeah. But you know, that's I feel like we're way over time at this point, so we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
If you'd like to tell us what you thought about Bad Times at the El Royale, or Japanese facial hair, or any of the other things that we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at podcast@somederpsplaygames.com, or somederpsplaygames@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Twitch, twitch.tv/somederpsplaygames. You can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on SoundCloud. Leave us ratings on iTunes. It helps other people find us and discover us. I think that's everything I had. Buddy, do you have anything else you wanted to promote?
I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
In that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.